last night, President Trump plunged the country into chaos without a shred of warning. The Trump administration announced a halt to virtually all federal funds across the country. In an instant, Donald Trump has shut off billions, perhaps trillions of dollars that directly support states, cities, towns, schools, hospitals, small businesses, and most of all, American families. This is a dagger at the heart of the average American family in red states, in blue states, in cities, in suburbs, in rural areas. It is just outrageous. Funds for things like disaster assistance, local law enforcement, rural hospitals, aid to the elderly, food for people in need, all are on the chopping block in this new administration. Why? They need tax cuts for the ultra-wealthy, and these cuts, they think, will fund them. Every one of our offices has been deluged with calls from people who are in panic. What is this going to mean? What if I have a hospital that has people on life support? What are we going to do? And just like the January 6th pardons, this decision is lawless, dangerous, destructive, cruel. It's illegal. It's unconstitutional. I spoke to my Attorney General this morning. She's head of the State Attorneys General Association. They're going to court right away on this horror. This, plain and simple, this is Project 2025. Project 2025 by another name. They knew how unpopular Project 2025 was, but the right-wing ideologues are still in control. So they had to do it in a different way, but it has the same consequences and will have the same horrible, negative, overwhelming reaction from the American people. And who is going to be the implementer of this? None other than the chief cook and bottle washer of Project 2025, Russell Vought. Putting someone like Russell Vought at OMB, the architect of Project 2025, is a huge danger sign to America.
Whew, wow, that was Senator Chuck Schumer, of course, the minority leader of the Senate, going off a little bit, as much as Chuck Schumer goes off today about the OMB memo that went out last night. That was a memo that went out that to the entire federal government from the acting officer, chief of the Office of Management and Budget and the Trump administration, which froze every single spending program and caused chaos and fear across the country. The memo, which is due to take effect today at 5 p.m. Eastern time, would cut off thousands of programs and cause chaos across the country all day. Now, veterans in the military are right in the center of the chaos, as we saw hundreds of social media posts, questions from nonprofits and others want to understand what has been cut and how they'll survive if the pause lasts very long. At the same time, Trump signed a bunch of long-awaited executive orders having to do with the DOD as well today around the COVID vaccine and transgender service. So a lot of news today. So we decided to do a breaking news show with you. I am Fred Wellman, host of On the Line with Vote Vets. You're right here with the Vote Vets crew. We're so glad to have you here joining us. Hope you'll leave a comment. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. I'll be sure to answer them when we can. So as you can see, a lot of news, a lot of scary stuff. I'm sure you felt it today. I know I had a lot of friends reaching out to me who felt just absolutely shocked by this rash decision that essentially, in many ways, shut down the government in a lot of ways. So it's been a long accusing day. So we want to talk about it. Media advocates are all scrambling to figure it out. It wasn't actually officially announced. The memo was sent out last night and began making its way across the government and into the press pretty quickly. The question, of course, from the beginning is the legality of the move. As Senator Schumer said, it's technically unconstitutional and against the law. On the face of it, it's a clear violation of the Constitution, which gives power of the purse solely to the Congress to pass and run the budget in Article 1. Remember, in the Constitution, the executive branch is Part 2, not Part 1. They also make the executive branch makes those recommendations. The budget is executed by them, but it's passed by Congress. Now, in addition to that, there's the Congressional Budget and Empowerment Control Act of 1974. That act allows a president to withhold funds in certain specific circumstances for limited periods of time and requires the president to spend a special message to Congress explaining the action. Congressmen must then decide whether to allow a spend to be deferred or rescinded. It does not provide for the president just withhold funds for policy. And it's for contingencies. I mean, he said he can't do it for policy goals. And however, that's what's messed up about this whole thing. The directive literally says from the Trump administration, I got to quote this. They're stating that they want to shut down these programs to figure out to make sure they're aligned with administration goals. And this line's amazing. They want to make sure the use of federal reform that aren't being used, the use of federal resources to advance Marxist equity, transgenderism, and Green New Deal social engineering policies is a waste of taxpayer dollars. My God, all Marxism. Okay. So they literally just cut off everybody. And I was reminded, I told the story today. It's kind of like when you lose your credit card and just see who squeals. Like, when you get a new one, you wait to see it. Maybe that magazine subscription you forgot about is a great way to figure it out. It's almost like they just cut off the spending to see who would complain. And they complained a lot. I mean, the impact was felt immediately as confusion surrounded whether it would impact SNAP, for example, food benefits, Pell Grants for college, loans, and more, VA home loans, VA benefits. It does directly impact veterans in a host of ways. And that came out pretty loudly today at a Senate Veterans Affairs Committee today hearing. That was a hearing today on community care. Ranking member Richard Blumenthal slammed the Trump administration's move. I mean, he was pretty straightforward. It's an illegal freeze of federal grants, includes those of the Department of Veterans Affairs. And he stressed that negative impact. Blumenthal also discussed in his conversation, the same conversation, we're going to watch it, the firing of all the inspector generals. If you don't remember, last Friday night, in one of those Friday night drops, the administration fired 17 independent inspector generals from several departments of the government, to include the DOD and the VA. Those are the guys that oversee fraud, waste, and abuse, and they were fired. It really makes you wonder. So let's watch Senator Blumenthal's his statement today.
But we're here on a morning when all of these programs are in severe and urgent jeopardy. The Trump administration has announced illegally that it will freeze federal aid for programs that are immensely important to veterans. This freeze on federal aid will hurt veterans by pausing funding for critical programs that millions of veterans and their families rely on. We're talking about homeless veterans, funding for veterans' nursing homes across the country, suicide prevention programs, many of the programs that we will be discussing today, and the efforts to streamline speed and safeguard access to community programs, reimbursement for those providers who need it to make community care work, frozen. We are deterring and discouraging that kind of community care right now in real time. And I urge all the members of the committee, I urge my colleagues to oppose this measure, to make their views known. I call on veterans and their organizations across the country to make their views known, because these funds must be freed immediately, or else veterans will be betrayed. There's nothing woke or Marxist about working to end veteran suicide or delivering our veterans the benefits they've earned and deserve. And I will put in the record later today a list of programs. It's going to be probably about 2 pages long. I have a tentative list here that will be adversely impacted by this freeze on funding. It is also, by the way, unsustainable legally. It violates the Impoundment Act. These funds have been lawfully appropriated under bills passed by the Congress and signed by the President, and no member of the executive branch, including the President, has the lawful power to simply stop them. I am concerned also about the action to dismiss the Inspector General. I'm going to be circulating a letter to my colleagues that would, in fact, protest to the President the firing of the VA's Inspector General, Mike Missel, who has worked for many years under both Republican and Democratic administrations to call out and stop waste, fraud, and abuse. He's done it in a very bipartisan or actually non-political way, aggressively and effectively. And the question for all of us is why this measure of firing the Inspector General of the VA was done at this moment when, in fact, he has been the bulwark against waste, fraud, and abuse in the VA, as have Inspector General across the executive branch. I believe strongly that the private sector healthcare system and the VA are complementary, and one route to care should never come at the expense of the other. I fear that's what's happening today. The erosion of VA direct care is a real threat, and I say erosion because it could happen gradually, not all of a sudden, but if it happens, it may well be irreparable.
Irreparable harm is true. In this case, he's talking about the community care. For those who aren't familiar, I'm sure many of you are. Community care is the idea of veterans, instead of getting their health care from within VA clinics and hospitals, they're outsourced to community care, community organizations. Again, that costs money. The reason community care is controversial is because many veterans live in places where there isn't enough community care. And it's been a big goal. It was a big goal of the last Trump administration to try and essentially outsource more medical care to the private sector. It's always a controversial issue. But today it becomes extra controversial because they decided to go ahead and freeze funds to many groups and nonprofits. You got to remember, much of the safety network and the support network for those of us who served come from the nonprofit sector as well as the federal. But let's look at, so you remember there, Blumenthal talked about how he would issue a list later. You got to see this graphic that JJ did. JJ, show him the graphic, the list of stuff. Yeah, that's the list of stuff that these are programs that they immediately identified would be affected by this OMB memo, this shutdown order. Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program. This is a suicide prevention for community suicide groups. Homeless providers grants and per diem. Grant and per diem program. Okay, so I'm going to put that one in framework for you. One of the biggest reasons we've reduced the veterans homelessness number of veterans that are homeless. Matter of fact, the last point in time count had us at the lowest level we've had of homeless veterans in probably ever. The reason, one of the big part of that is these grants and per diem programs that many very small nonprofits, most of your veterans housing is done by organizations like US Vets in LA and nationally and others. They provide the housing and the support for veterans in their local communities. They get that money through these grant and per diem programs, which give them money for the number of veterans that they house. If that's cut off, they close. I mean, it is that close. I've gone to National Coalition of Homeless Veterans events, and it's that close that if these groups went even 2 or 3 weeks without getting their money, they're done. They can't pay their bills. So there goes your homeless veterans. VA Supportive Service for Veteran Families Program, which helps low-income veterans with rental assistance, paying for their apartments and homes. Transitional Assistance Grants Program. All those things help veterans who are in transition get new jobs as they leave the military or as they're transitioning from being wounded or injured. Those programs that legal services. It goes on and on. State Veterans Home Care. So another one. Most veterans are housed, our elderly veterans are housed in state homes. Many states, most states have a home for their retired veterans. That's paid for through these grant programs that would be cut off. Payments to state for the retention of nurses, suicide mortality review cooperative agreements, veteran suicide, a huge issue. It's been estimated 21 veterans a day commit suicide. There goes the money for that. And then the veteran cemetery grants. Those are grants that are going out to provide burial grounds. We're losing thousands of veterans a month thanks to the aging of the World War II and Korea populations and Vietnam at this point. All these are programs that directly affect veterans. And that's just today that they discovered. It's huge, it's devastating, and it's widespread. And all of this comes on top of a worldwide freeze on and housing and everything else, or worldwide freeze on federal aid for international aid. So, the United States is the largest provider of international aid and assistance. Our Ukraine allies, of course, are getting military gear, but they also get civil society help. We also help food programs around the world. Those were put on hold as well. And look, the Republicans have shown no interest whatsoever. I think that, the Republicans have shown no interest whatsoever in fighting this. It isn't just Donald Trump. This is all in Project 2025. As this unfolded today, Republicans were going on TV, going before the microphones, and not complaining one bit. Again, this is a complete erosion of the constitutional order. 238 years, the U.S. Constitution. And for the first time in history, the U.S. Congress is saying, let him do what he wants. This is grossly, grossly illegal and a total handover of their power. And yet, the entire Republican coalition is down with it. Luckily, Democrats are fighting back. They're fighting back hard. On top of that, I got to show you a coalition of groups today. Today, there was a lawsuit filed by the National Council of Nonprofits, American Public Health Association, Main Street Alliance, LGBTQ. Just a number of groups came together, and we have breaking news as we go on here, as you may have seen already. I saw on the comments, some of you saw today, a federal judge did put a temporary restraining order on implementing this memo. Again, this memo would have kicked in at 5 p.m. Eastern today. U.S. District Judge Lauren Ali Khan in Washington, D.C. said the Trump administration must not block existing funding programs until at least 5 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, the 3rd of February. So they got 6 days. Typically what this means is a temporary restraining order, much like the one they issued last week on the birthright citizenship rule they're trying to put in. This allows organizations to gather more defendants or plaintiffs, I suppose, right, to sue the government and seek redress to stop this from happening. So this judge in D.C., a federal judge, has already put a restraining order, so this won't go into effect right away. But it's a mess. Hopefully more groups will join, more groups will get involved in this thing, and we'll have to stop it. But look, it just goes to show that there is really no plan. They don't protect veterans. They don't care if we end up homeless. They don't care if we end up with no health care. It's really just a sick game to all of them. It really is. And this goes on top of the hiring freeze we saw that came out in the very first day of the executive orders. If you remember that one, that federal hiring freeze really impacted veterans deeply, because many of the veterans that were affected they had put anybody in that pipeline that was supposed to get a job after February 8th, their contract was canceled. This caused a lot of heartache because healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, mental health providers were in the pipeline, which we desperately need. It was that one. Again, they put this thing out and then had to back it off when they realized how bad it was. But we're still seeing real questions about cuts of personnel at the VA and supportive services. So again, a lot of willy-nilly stuff that's affecting the VA and veterans, and we'll keep an eye on that. Now, look, let's cross the Potomac to the Pentagon, that big 5-shaped crazy building. It's not much better over there. I mean, matter of fact, as we went live, it got even stupider over at the Pentagon. But for those who aren't paying attention, which I can't imagine you guys are those people, as you realize, Pete Hegseth was confirmed as the Secretary of Defense. He was by a 50-50 vote. They had to get J.D. Vance to come in and break the vote. And so now Pete Hegseth was sworn in on Saturday, had his first day of work yesterday, and immediately Donald Trump began issuing some executive orders we've been kind of waiting on. We expected some. I'm not sure they were as bad as we expected, but some were worse. One of those, of course, is a long-awaited discussion of a transgender ban on military service. For those of you who remember Trump 1.0, he did issue a tweet. If you remember the first time, he put a tweet out banning transgender service. That ended up in the courts, as they do. This time what he did is it was sort of widely expected, but it directs Pete Hegseth to come up with how they would implement a policy. The way it's framed, it's not happening right away. There's weird little things there. Like they talk about there's no use of pronouns, that they're not allowed, women are not allowed to use men's bathrooms and men are allowed to use women's bathrooms immediately, or sleeping areas. Okay. And then it asks for a study. But what it alludes to in that order, very deep in it, is talking about mental health conflicts. He claimed that troops who identify as a gender other than their biological one, it conflicts with the soldier's commitment to an honorable, truthful, and disciplined lifestyle, even in one's personal life, and is harmful to military readiness, requiring a military revised policy on that. So while not outright banning it, what they're kind of doing is they're going to update military policy, perhaps on mental health or medicines you take. For example, as a pilot, when I was a helicopter pilot, when I flew those things, if I was taking certain drugs, I got grounded. Okay. if you had certain psychological things, like if you're bipolar or schizophrenic, you would get kicked out of the military. So it alludes to that will be the future of transgender service. It's not a sweeping ban like last time, but the good news is we've already seen from Lambda Legal and others stepping up that they'll fight this ban as well. But thousands of transgender Americans serve in the military. We need them. We can't recruit enough other people of everybody else to come in. We need everybody we can get to defend our country. That was the first EO. He also, this is my favorite one. He issued a COVID vaccine one. At least 8,200 troops were forced on the military in 2021 because they refused to obey a lawful order when they decided not to get the vaccine. Now, notices did go out in 2023 that said that they could come back in after the requirement for the COVID vaccine was no longer in use. Biden administration actually rescinded it and said, hey, look, if you want to come back in, you can. A whopping 113 came back. Because let's be honest, once you're out, I don't know. I like being retired. I'll just leave it at that. However, Trump has ordered a reinstatement process that requires they meet military entry standards, but they want to bring them back in. They won't reduce. And this is really where it gets crazy. We will offer full reinstatement to any service member who's expelled from the armed forces due to the COVID vaccine mandate. And we will restore them their former rank with full pay. In addition, they're saying they will pay them back all the money they lost while they're out of service, which is really big. Okay. And they also extended this to anyone who was willing to sign a sworn statement saying they left the service voluntarily to avoid the vaccine. That could be thousands more who stated they quit the military to avoid getting a shot without being kicked out. While it's not expected to bring a lot of folks back in, it could take a pretty big chunk of the budget out if a lot do, and they get 4 years of back pay. As of one of the, as I think Ron Filipkowski from the Midas Touch guys pointed out, he goes, imagine what that does to morale if you stayed in and gutted it out for the last 4 years, and some clown who refused a legal vaccine gets back in, gets all of his money and rank back like he never left. It's sure going to be great for discipline and good for morale. But that's the other one. And the other one, which is kind of weird, is the Iron Dome for America. That's an executive order literally called that. Establishing now the Iron Dome, of course, if you're familiar with it, is a Israeli short-range rocket defense system that protects cities and hard points within Israel. Trump's always wanted his own Iron Dome. Apparently, he's going to call this one an Iron Dome, but it's actually a much larger thing. He wants to establish a way to shoot missiles down from space, which is something the U.S. has not pursued since President Reagan. You guys remember, you're probably too young to remember, maybe us old veterans remember the Star Wars initiative from under Reagan, which was abandoned because it was too expensive and the technology never worked. This executive order directs implementation of a next generation missile defense shield for the United States against ballistic, hypersonic, and advanced cruise missiles and other next generation aerial attacks. With the goal of providing for the common sense of America, it accelerates the deployment of hypersonic ballistic tracking space sensor lasers, and I don't know, I could go on. A lot of really fun stuff in there. I think the defense contractors will love it, but I'm not necessarily sure if it's even possible. But now we're going to put this is a major thing, and we're skipping all the other supply chains and all those things. Look, it's a lot of stuff at once. It has a lot of people scrambling. If you've got friends who work for the government, work with the government, even private citizens. I have family members who own businesses near military bases. It was a very dramatic and stressful day for everybody. And there's no need for any of it. None of this follows the typical government process. The idea that an acting director would issue a memo at 4 o'clock on a Monday, and the entire United States government is going to shut down in 24 hours, essentially, is shocking. No notification of anyone, just simply putting these things out. So it has really been a tough couple of days. But of course, let's not forget the last act of the day was we came online just as we were supposed to get ready to go live. A story came out from Fox News. I think JJ, I think you had the screenshot of that one too, where this is incredible. Pete Hegseth will announce shortly he's immediately pulling retired General Mark Milley's personal security detail and security clearance. Now, if you recall, Milley's had a security detail because his life was threatened by Iran after the death of Soleimani in Iraq. So he's had a security detail this whole time. They've decided apparently, according to Fox, which may as well be the administration, and they're going to pull that. But it gets worse, actually. In addition to that, the secretary has directed a new acting inspector general. Remember, they fired the last IG in place their own IG to conduct a review board to determine if enough evidence exists for General Milley to be stripped of a star in retirement based on his actions to, quote, undermine the chain of command during President Donald Trump's first term. For those who aren't familiar, you retire at the last rank where you served in good order. So one of the disciplinary tools they've used in the past against officers and others who failed their duty is after retirement, they'll bust them down to the last rank where they served honorably. What they're implying here, since General Milley got a pardon from President Biden, they can't convict him of anything. So what they're going to do is mess with his retirement for the rest of his life, bust him down to 3-star. But here's where it gets super petty, because we're talking about Pete Hegseth and everybody else. The Pentagon will be also removing a second portrait of General Milley that's inside the Pentagon. This is one from the Army's Marshal Quarter on the 3rd floor, honoring his service as the Chief of Staff of the Army before he was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That removal will take place as soon as tonight, after they had already removed his portrait that was just hung recently because he served as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. That's how petty these assholes are. They're removing the portraits of a man who served honorably both as the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, but absolutely honorably as the Chief of Staff of the United States Army. That's the kind of people we're dealing with right now. That just broke the breaking news. So that's a lot. It's a lot of news in one day. Even I agree with you. It is a lot. I did see some of the comments. I see you guys' comments. Thank you for joining us. The suicide hotline is still going. There's no issues with that. My understanding is that it was a funded grant program. VA has already said they're going to fund that, but there was questions about that again. And you guys asked the questions here, shows just how crazy a day it's been. No one's really sure what's in and what's out. I mean, the Medicaid portals for all 50 states were closed, and Carolyn Leavitt, the new press secretary, tried to claim that that was just a glitch, that it just happened to have the same day they're talking about cutting Medicaid payments, but there was a glitch. The website didn't work. They're supposedly restoring that as we speak. Again, we've got a lot going on, and it is a lot to think about, and we'll be keeping an eye on it, obviously. The news is simple, that we're going to have a time of chaos and madness. The Republicans in Congress, who have both houses of the House and Senate, aren't interested in providing that oversight to stop it. So we'll be working with our partners like Senator Blumenthal, who's keeping us informed about updates, what they're doing to fight back. Right now, they're reaching out to government officials and inspectors to find out what exactly is being affected by these things. We will see more from the lawsuit to stop the OMB memo going out. So keep an eye on that this week. But as you know, I'm sure there'll be more. The Project 2025 plan is deep and secret, and I'm sure we'll see much more of it from this. Well, that's all I've got. I think that's enough for half an hour. We really appreciate you. We'll keep on keeping you guys updated on what's going on amongst veterans and military families. But here's the thing, guys. We need you to reach out. If you're in a red state, you've got to hit your congressman up. You've got to hit your senator up. And even if you're not in their state, reach out to those running the Veterans Affairs Committee. Reach out to those running the DOD and the military oversight committees. This is real stuff that's going to affect families and our national security for years to come. So you have the power to dial the phone and call them. They have to take your call. Make that call. Make your voice heard. We know it works because when we started screaming and raising holy hell, they rolled back the cuts on mental health and physical health providers to the VA. They know that they're figuring out very quickly they've overstepped their bounds and it's too far. And so we're going to have to keep on fighting. So we need to use our voices and make sure they understand that we won't stand for our veterans and our military families suffering because of the incompetence or the duplicitousness of the Trump administration. And finally, as always, I'm going to tell you about our stuff. Of course, you can support VoteVets. This is what we do. We have teams tracking all of this. We have professionals working on our government relations teams, reaching out to members of Congress to talk to them about this, offering policy perspectives as needed. You can find us at votevets.org. 2 key buttons I always tell you about every week. Number 1, to donate. We do this because of your support. This is our organization exists because of the 2 million supporters that we have, and that's you guys. Number 2 is the take action button. That's one that's really relevant today. We have a button on our website that says take action. You can just go there, and that'll help you sign up for our emails. It'll help you stay information. You can get updates from us as they go. You can sign up for things we're doing. For example, if we end up having veterans come to DC to talk to members of Congress about these issues, maybe you can participate in that. There's a million things you can do to help us right now and help our fellow veterans and military service members in a very, very difficult time. They need our support. We don't want those in uniform doing these things. They want us to do it for them, and that's our job. So really hope that you will help us. There's some great groups out there. In the meantime, follow VoteVets on all the social media channels. They made it really easy. We make it so easy for you. Every social media channel you go to, it's Vote Vets. All one word, Vote Vets, votevets.org on Blue Sky. We're growing a great community on Blue Sky. Most importantly, I'd love you to go to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button so we can grow our YouTube community as well. That's where you can find these shows. We'll do more of them as we go forward. With all of that, I am Fred Wellman, host of Online with Vote Vets. We appreciate you being here. We'll keep you up to date. Stay in the fight, folks.